Before the video begins, I wanted to say that I searched all over the internet for anyone who may have previously made something similar to this. I checked YouTube, Reddit, and a few other places that I could think of and found nothing similar. I could have missed something, and if I did, please let me know, but to my knowledge, this is all original ideas. This was going to be a simple Reddit post, but it quickly became more intricate, and I feel like it deserved its own video. That said, let's get into it. Destiny is a game that has a very passionate community. From trashing on the game during the bad times to praising the game when it's reached all new highs, the community is always the first to speak up on the state of the game. Whether you agree with them or not, you'll almost always find that a typical player will have some strong opinions on various aspects of the day-to-day grind. It's natural, really, that when you become so invested in a game like Destiny, your opinions towards the game, its systems, its community, and many other things weigh heavily in one direction or the other. However, at the end of the day, if the opinions are coming from an active player, you know that they come from a place of love. We all want the game to succeed, so we give it the criticism it deserves, but also make sure that they know about the things that they're doing right. I first started playing Destiny back when they released the beta for Destiny 1. I was immediately hooked. I played a ton of D1, participated in every raid, several nightfalls. I grinded for a god rolled Imago loot because I never got a Fatebringer to drop, not salty by the way. I also grinded for all the Strike exclusive Warlock gear because that cosmetic grind kept me going. I bought all the expansions and played through every one of them, cementing myself a legacy of a god-slaying Iron Lord that carried with me to D2 upon its release. I purchased and participated in everything that Destiny 2 has had to offer me. Through the good times and the bad times, I was there, and I almost always enjoyed myself. And when I didn't, I stopped playing, took a break, and came back when I was ready. I wanted to say all this to preface what I'm about to say. Credentials aren't required, but I feel the more hardcore players will see that this is coming from someone who has substantial time in the game, knows a decent amount about what would be good for the players, and overall just give an idea for fresh content in this game that we all have a love-hate relationship with. Destiny is in a crisis. The three main gameplay modes are Crucible, Strikes, and Gambit. After talking to above average and below average PvP players, I can confidently say that PvP can feel good, but it can also feel really bad. Now this is before the ability changes coming with the 30th anniversary update and the upcoming release of Void 3.0 with the Witch Queen expansion. However, I think I speak for a majority of players when I say that PvP is great for a game like Destiny, but PvP alone can make the game feel stale very quickly, to the point where I've seen people drop the game altogether for months on end because they don't want to deal with the meta in the current PvP sandbox, or it just got boring. Strikes are in a similar boat, but worse. Strikes have almost no replay value, aside from when they're mandatory to complete certain quests, and even then, it's just another checkbox to get to the end goal. The only valid argument I've seen in recent years regarding replayability in Strikes is Nightfalls, and even then it's mainly for the rewards and not really about the moment-to-moment gameplay. And once you do get the rewards you want, there's no real reason to continue doing it. Lastly, you guys want to hear a joke? It's Gambit. All that being said, the main three core playlists of the game have reasons to be in the game, but arguably, aside from Crucible, there's no real reason for replaying these activities once you get your weekly pinnacle rewards, and even then, not all of us enjoy PvP to the extent some others might. Players need a reason to grind and something interesting to grind. Replayability is defined differently by different people. Some people grind for the loot, some for the prestige, and some just for the fun of the activity. I think that what I'm proposing here is a great mix that tackles all of these perspectives and more to give as many players as possible a reason to keep playing. What I'm proposing is what I'm calling Boundless. Boundless is a combination of Destiny 2 and a game genre that I've fallen in love with over the past few years, known as roguelikes. For those that are unfamiliar, the concept of a roguelike is this: you start with nothing. Every time you start the game, you start from square one, and over the course of your run, you obtain skills, weapons, abilities, or whatever it may be that make you stronger and help you survive the rest of the run, or at least until you get your next power spike in the form of another skill or weapon or whatever. Some prime examples of roguelikes are Risk of Rain 2, Slay the Spire, and Hades. Now for those hardcore players out there who will say, but Sinful, those are roguelites, not roguelikes. I know, but for the sake of this video, I've grouped them all under the banner of roguelikes to simplify its implementation to Destiny, a game that is far and away not a roguelike. Now, after all this, you may be thinking, that doesn't sound like Destiny at all. How would this work? Well, allow me to explain. The general gameplay loop would work something like this. Solo, or with a fire team of up to 3 players, you would launch Boundless and enter the playspace. Upon entering the space, your equipment would be held by the curator. I've given this job to Ikora as she seems to be the most fit for the job due to lore implications that I'll explain later on, as well as just to give her a functional use in our current game. Once all of your equipped gear as well as the other gear in your inventory are given over to Ikora, you and your allies are all given a white rarity, level 1 weapon, and a full outfit of white, level 1 gear each. The gear will obviously change based on class, however the weapon is the same and will change from season to season. After this, you enter into a wave-based combat trial with your fire team. You and your team must overcome wave after wave of enemies, while every 5 waves your team encounters a boss. Once the boss is defeated, you may opt to leave the activity, or continue until you are either slain in combat, or until you are presented the same option again after the next boss. At round 5, you and each of your fire team members are given a choice of your subclass. And when I say subclass, I mean subclass. As an example, let's say you just beat the level 5 boss and you're given your choice. Your options as a warlock could be something like Middle Tree Void, Top Tree Dawn, or Middle Tree Dawn. From there, you would have to decide what you value more, and this decision would affect the rest of your run, as this would be the subclass you're bound to until you leave, beat the activity, or die. Every 5 levels after, you and your fire team would be given choices to enhance certain things about your gameplay. This could be buffs to your weapon's rate of fire, extended super duration, or even the ability to throw 3 grenades instead of 1. Think of how Trinity Eagle fires 3 arrows. There are many options to choose from, and every run should be unique with the choices you're presented. You did hear me right, by the way. I did say beat the activity. Boundless, despite the name, would have a level cap. I was personally thinking somewhere around the 75 mark, but this number could easily change depending on how easy or difficult that is to reach. Another thing to consider for progression is gear. Keeping white gear and only 1 weapon would be awful to deal with in terms of gameplay as well as raw stats, so during the run, every single enemy you defeat has a chance of dropping gear and weapons. The longer you go, the higher the chance that that drop is a higher rarity. So if you're on level 1, you may see a drop that's green or white, but if you're on level 60, you'll most likely be seeing blues and purples. With the constant dropping of gear and weapons, as well as the new options for your upgrade paths, there will be an object that must be interacted with for your team to move to the next wave. This will give everyone a moment of reprieve between waves to make changes to their loadouts so that they are as deadly as possible to survive the incoming onslaught of enemies. The last thing to touch on, considering the gameplay loop, is death and the option to leave. As I said before, your team has 3 waves to end the activity. You can leave early every 5 levels, you can beat the entire activity by defeating the final boss, or the activity will end if everyone dies. With that being said, depending on how many players are on your team, you will be given a set amount of revives. If you're playing solo, you'll be given 4 revives to use if you die. 2 members will have 4 as well, and 3 members will have 5. Revives will need to be used manually by the downed member, so if a member of your fire team goes down, you can revive them and not waste one of your precious revives. However, if you risk yourself to get them up and fail to do so, you've now wasted 2 instead of 1. If you leave the activity early, or if you beat the activity, you'll receive all the rewards that you've earned, but if your fire team is wiped and you have no revives, the activity will end, and you will only receive half of what you normally would have gotten. Now, as a note, I'd like to say that I've left some of this up for interpretation, simply because I don't know how technical limitations could affect the game mode, as well as the fact that without testing, some of these numbers may feel too forgiving or too punishing. Without playing it, I couldn't tell you for sure if 75 waves is a good number to end it on, or if the number of revives for each team size is too much, too little, or just right. So take some of this with a grain of salt. With that being said, the core gameplay loop is still there and would still be essentially the same, even with some number tweaking. Now, some of you may have noticed that I mentioned rewards, and yeah, of course I did. Any activity in Destiny should give you rewards. With Boundless being a new core activity, you receive a currency called Ethereal Shards by participating in completing runs. If you do beat the final boss, you will also receive a certain amount of Ethereal tokens. Shards can be turned into Ikora for a variety of different rewards. Some of them could affect your next Boundless run, allowing you to start with better equipment or even getting your subclass level 1 instead of having to wait to level 5. Or they could be activity-exclusive weapons or armor, excluding your starting weapon. Tokens could be turned in for cosmetic rewards or special weapons and gear. Cosmetic rewards could be emblems, shaders, ornaments, etc. I exclude your starting weapon because a very unique reward around Boundless would be the option to buy your starting weapon to use outside of Boundless. You would then be able to use ethereal tokens to upgrade it through the rarities and decide which perks are added to it once it reaches legendary status. You could do this multiple times to attain PvE and PvP roles. I also purposely said that the weapon would change from season to season so that there's a reason to come back when a new season begins, even if the other cosmetic rewards might not change. There's also rewards in the form of prestige. New triumphs leading to a new title would be available to unlock and earn. Triumphs like completing a run, unlocking your starting weapon, buying a certain amount of buffs for future runs could all be options for triumphs for you to unlock. The title I've personally grown fond of is Timeless, but it could easily be changed to Unbound, Ethereal, or even Simulated. Last but not least is the lore implications, and this is more simple than you may think. During the endless nights, when the Undying was threatening the city, and through our countless adventures through Vex simulations, we've had the opportunity to research how Vex create their simulations. One piece of tech that Ikora was working on with Asher Mir's assistance was a device that allowed us to make Vex simulations of our own. The device isn't stable and it has its limitations, however it has enough capability to create environments where we can practice not against other Guardians, but against the real threats to our city and our world. So at the end of the day, the game mode has a ton of replayability and reasons to do so. You won't be grinding through the same content for nothing, and one run could be vastly different to another depending on what options you're presented. It's also solo friendly for those who may not have people to play with, but I do hesitate to add matchmaking to it, as I do see a problem with griefing or just disagreeing when people may want to leave, but you think your team is strong enough to continue. That said, it could easily be implemented based on player desire. Now, let's be real for a moment. Even if someone from Bungie were to see this, the odds of it being realistically added to the game are extremely small. But as a person passionate about the game and frustrated with the drip feed style of content that they're currently resigned to, I find myself playing the game less and less as there really isn't anything bringing me back. If someone at Bungie sees this and wants to contact me regarding implementing an idea like this into the game, my contact information is down below, and I'd be ecstatic. Because the whole reason I got into roguelike games in the first place is because Destiny stopped giving me reasons to return to the game unless I wanted to do 1 or 2 runs of seasonal activity, listen to some story dialogue, and then wait till next week's reset for anything new. In fact, when I booted up Destiny to get the background footage, I struggled to think of anything I could do and actually have fun with. Granted, I had a bit of a bias over what kind of footage I wanted, but even if I didn't, I'd still struggle. And this is the first time in a few months that I booted the game, which goes to show that even with a bunch of things that I probably had on my to-do list, I didn't want to do any of them. My own opinions aside, Boundless could be a breath of fresh air for those of us who don't want to slog through strikes and may not be up for playing Crucible. A new face to Destiny's core playlist is desperately needed, and Boundless could be just the thing to keep players entertained, bring new players to the game, or just be one more thing that the player base can do in their downtime while waiting for the next season. It can offer hundreds of hours of content per season and have rewards to go along with it. It may not be for everyone, but I think a vast majority of players would try it and see for themselves just how fun it could be. Now that over 50% of people have left, I'd like to ask you all to like, subscribe, and comment. If your unyielding rage towards me can't be contained in just the YouTube comment section, please feel free to visit me live on Twitch, and you can cuss me out in person. Thank you all for listening. I'll see you next time.